Somewhere this weekend, a bride is picking her wedding readings. She has not opened a Bible yet, but one chapter is already on the list. Stationery shops sell it in calligraphy. Wedding blogs rank it in their top 3 every single year. We hear love is patient, love is kind, and we picture candlelight, vows. 2 people staring at each other while a groomsman reads into a microphone that keeps cutting out. That is almost certainly not what Paul had in mind. Read the 15 lines of 1 Corinthians 13 slowly. Read them without the candlelight. They stop sounding like a love song. They start sounding like an inspection. 7 things love does, without exception. 8 things it refuses to do, under any provocation. No adjectives about how love feels. Only verbs about what love does when nobody is making it. Hold your own week up against that list, honestly. You will not clear it. Nobody has, except one man, one time, completely. Last week, we stood in a church so gifted it could barely function. We watched Paul tell a room full of talented, feuding believers that every dazzling ability they kept showing off, however real, however spirit-given, weighed exactly nothing without this. This week, we stop rushing past the sentence that stopped them cold. We are giving it the whole week it earned. Not a single day tucked inside a bigger lesson. Its own study, its own portrait, examined line by line. Because Paul did not write these 15 lines to be skimmed on the way to a wedding toast. He wrote them to be lived, and by the end of this week, you will see whose face was hiding inside them the entire time. Let's build the portrait, one line at a time. Sunday opens by refusing to let anyone off easy. Paul runs through the most impressive spiritual resume a person could assemble, speaking in the tongues of men and of angels. Prophecy that unlocks every mystery. Faith so strong it could relocate a mountain. Giving away everything you own to feed the poor, even handing your own body over to be burned for what you believe. Then he delivers the verdict on every item on that list. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. Not the resume of a mediocre believer, the resume of the most spiritually accomplished person imaginable, canceled out by one missing ingredient. Paul is not saying tongues and prophecy and generosity are worthless. He is saying they are worthless the moment love stops being what drives them. So what is this love that outweighs martyrdom? Greek has several words that all get flattened into a single English syllable. Eros for romantic desire, storge for family affection, philia for warm loyalty between friends. Paul reaches past every one of those. He picks agape, and he does not pick it lightly. That word family shows up more than 100 times across his letters alone, more than in almost any other New Testament writer. Agape was never the word you would use for a favorite dessert or a passing crush. It describes a love that is decided rather than felt, aimed at someone's good, whether or not they deserve it, whether or not they return it that same day. Which is exactly why Jesus can warn in Matthew 24 that because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. Cold is a strange word to use about a decision, but Paul and Jesus both treat agape like a fire that has to be tended, not a fact you can bank once and forget. Left alone, it does not stay warm on its own. It has to be fed. If walking slowly through one chapter like this is opening it up in a way you have not seen before, hit the like button so YouTube knows to put this study in front of others who need it. And subscribe with the bell on, because tomorrow we pick up the brush and start painting the portrait action by action. If you are able, joining as a channel member helps keep studies like this free for everyone who needs them. Monday hands Paul a brush. Starting here, he stops defining love by comparison. He starts painting it action by action. Listen to the whole portrait first. One unbroken breath, the way the Corinthians would have heard it read aloud. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. 15 lines. 7 things love does without fail. 8 things it refuses to do, no matter the provocation. Monday belongs to the 7. Suffers long is one word in Greek. Makrothymeo, built from long in temper. Literally, a long fuse. Not a personality some people are lucky enough to be born with. a length you choose to give your anger before it goes off. Is kind shares its root with the word Peter uses when he tells us we have tasted that the Lord is gracious. The same family of words used throughout the Psalms for God's own mercy toward people who did not earn it. Rejoices in the truth uses a verb that means feeling joy alongside someone else's good news, even when that good news has nothing to do with you. Bears all things comes from a word that originally meant to cover, the way a roof covers a house through weather. Love holds shelter over people instead of exposing them, believes all things, and hopes all things are close cousins, giving someone the benefit of the doubt today, still expecting good of them tomorrow, refusing to write anyone off as a finished story. Endures all things uses the word for standing under a heavy weight, rather than stepping out from beneath it. Set that whole list beside what Paul calls the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. You start to notice it is not a second list. It is the same character wearing a different label. 7 brushstrokes in. And notice something Paul never does here. He never once describes a feeling. Every verb is something you do with your hands, your patience, your time. Whatever you think love is, if it never shows up as an action. 1 Corinthians 13 does not recognize it yet. Tuesday turns the portrait over. We paint the negative space. The 8 things love will not do. And this half hits closer to home, because these are not exotic sins. They are the ordinary reflexes of an average Tuesday. Love does not envy. The word is zelu. Paul used the very same root 2 verses earlier in a good sense, telling the Corinthians to desire the higher gifts. Wanting a gift is not the problem. Resenting the person who already has it is. Does not parade itself is one word. Per pereomai. It is almost a portrait of exactly what last week's whole study was about. Believers turning their gifts into a performance for an audience. Love refuses the stage. Is not puffed up renders physiu, a word that pictures something inflated with air, like a bellows pumped full of its own importance until it forgets it is mostly empty space. Does not behave rudely, does not seek its own. That describes someone who has simply stopped keeping score of whose turn it is to be served. And then the line that might be the most quietly radical item on the whole list: thinks no evil, or more literally, keeps no ledger of evil. The verb logizomai is an accounting term, the kind of word you would use for closing the books. Most of us keep the books open on the people who have hurt us. We file every slight away where we can find it again later. Love closes the ledger, not because the wrong never happened, because love refuses to run interest on it. Does not rejoice in iniquity closes the list by circling back to where the does half began. Rejoicing, except aimed at truth instead of at someone else's downfall. 7 plus 8, 15 lines. Together, they form one completed portrait, which makes it worth pausing. Hold your own week up against it, not to feel condemned, just to be honest. Where in the last 7 days did you keep a ledger open instead of closing it? Where did you parade something instead of simply doing it quietly? If the honest answer is uncomfortable, you are in good company. Every reader of this chapter for 2,000 years has landed in the same place. Every reader except one. And here is what makes the next part the most important section of the entire week. Because Wednesday is where the portrait stops being an assignment and becomes a face. Paul almost certainly was not picturing an abstraction while he wrote these 15 lines. He was picturing a person he had met, blinded, on a road outside Damascus. And once you know that, you cannot read the chapter the same way again. Go back through the list a second time. But this time, read it as a description instead of a demand. Jesus suffers long. Paul later writes to Timothy that he himself was shown mercy, so that in him, the very worst of sinners, Christ might display his immense patience, using that identical long fuse word, stretched out over a violent enemy of the church who became its greatest missionary. Jesus is kind. Peter tells us we have tasted that the Lord is gracious, using the Greek word krestos, built on the same root as Monday's kindness, a kindness that is not a mood, but his very nature. Jesus rejoices in the truth. On the same night he is betrayed, he tells his disciples he wants his own joy to remain in them, full and complete. Hours before the cross, Jesus bears and endures all things. The book of Hebrews says he endured the cross, endured hostility from sinners against himself for the joy set before him. Nobody in history has borne more weight and stayed standing under it. And Jesus believes all things. when a frightened disciple named Ananias warned him that the man called Saul was dangerous, a known persecutor of the church. Jesus answered simply that Saul was his chosen instrument. He saw past a resume of violence to a future the man himself could not yet imagine. Every line of the portrait, tried on a real person instead of an ideal, fits him exactly, not approximately, exactly. Which means 1 Corinthians 13 was never only a description of a virtue floating out in the world for us to admire from a distance. It was a portrait, painted in advance, of Jesus. 1 John says it plainly. God is love. Not that God has love the way you or I might have patience on a good day. Love is what God is, all the way down. And every brushstroke Paul painted was already hanging on a wall Paul had personally seen with his own eyes. Thursday steps back from the portrait to ask why it will still be hanging on the wall after everything else in this chapter has been taken down. Prophecies will fail, Paul writes. Tongues will cease. Knowledge will simply vanish away. Every gift the Corinthians had been so busy ranking each other by has an expiration date built into it. Because every gift exists to get the church to a destination it has not reached yet. He illustrates it with growing up. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see in a mirror, dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I also am known. Every gift, every ounce of spiritual insight any of us has this side of eternity is a child's version of the real thing, useful for exactly as long as we are still growing up. But love has no expiration date, because love was never a tool for getting somewhere else. Faith will one day give way to sight when there is nothing left to have faith about, because you can finally see him. Hope will one day give way to arrival when there is nothing left to hope for, because the thing hoped for has come. Both are wonderful. Both are built to retire the moment they succeed. Love does not retire, because love was never the road toward God's character. Love is God's character. And now abide faith, hope, love, these three. But the greatest of these is love. Not greatest because it tries harder than faith and hope. Greatest because it is the only one of the three that will still describe God and describe us, once faith and hope have finished their work and gone home. So here is the whole week laid side by side. 15 lines. 7 things love does without fail. 8 things it refuses to do under any provocation. And one face, examined from every angle this week, that fits every single line without a gap. Which leaves 2 questions worth sitting with honestly, instead of rushing past. First, if 1 Corinthians 13 is a portrait and not just a poem, where does your own week actually match the brushstrokes? And where do you already know it does not? Not to leave you feeling small, just to be honest. Because this chapter was never handed to us so we could recite it. It was handed to us so we could be measured by it and then changed by it. Second, and this one cuts closer, whatever you are proudest of this week, whatever gift or effort or sacrifice you would name first if someone asked what you have done for God lately. Ask whether love was the current actually running through it, or whether you were quietly running the show for yourself the entire time. Paul already gave us the math. Take love out and the total is 0, no matter how large the numbers looked before you subtracted it. Here is where it stops being pressure and starts being relief. You were never asked to paint this portrait from nothing, working alone on a blank canvas, with willpower as your only brush. The portrait has already been finished once, completely, in a person, and that same person now lives in you by his spirit, painting those same 15 lines through your ordinary week, a little more each day, patiently, without keeping score of how slowly you are learning. So the next time you hear this chapter read at a wedding, listen to it differently. It was never really a description of the love between 2 people standing at an altar. It was a portrait of the love that was already standing there, waiting for both of them, long before either one walked in. If sitting inside one chapter for an entire week opened something up for you, tell me in the comments which brushstroke hit home the hardest. I read everyone, and they genuinely keep this study going. Share this with someone who has only ever heard this passage read at a wedding and nowhere else. If you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. We still have the rest of the quarter ahead of us, and you do not want to miss where this study goes next. Hit the like button if this portrait changed how you see the chapter. And if you are able, become a channel member so studies like this stay free for everyone who needs them. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And the next time those 15 lines find you, may you see the face inside them before you hear a single vow.